Good afternoon. How are you? Well, perhaps you're getting ready for a long weekend. Congratulations. Hope you enjoy yourself. We're going to be pretty quiet. I may get some work done. The Jefferson report is that where I am in the late afternoon, it's 82 degrees. It was 90 at one point today. They talked about showers, but none have happened. And so the road is dry, and that's nice. And there's no wind. So that's basically the report. It seems to me that commentators are generally coming late to the realization that this is an important election, given how crazy, in a fascist kind of way, Trump is. I thought it was obvious when he ran the first time, 2016. But people who didn't do their jobs right sort of allowed him to get away with it. And I think of Comey as public enemy number one. And then he went on to handle badly the administration that he had intentionally or by accident or incompetence made possible, that is the Trump administration. There are all sorts of things we talk about that Trump did wrong. We can talk about how he seemed to dance with dictators and praise them, and even be beholden to them, like the love letters, if you will, he had with the leader of North Korea. But we can't forget something that Biden was doing well even before he became a candidate and continued to do well after that. We're talking about in the 2020 election. Because by that time, Trump had literally killed us by failing to redress the risk of COVID-19. Now, he knew the risk. And we know that because he gave an interview to Woodward, and he told them that this is really terrible. But then he did nothing about it. Shining lights down people, animal prescriptions. And what was behind it? He wanted us to go to work at all costs, including the cost to our health, because for him, the economy, if working, would help voters overlook Trump's other failures. And they weren't as obsessive as some of us are to hold the government to a standard that would be recognized as a civilization, a constitutional government, and one that does believe in the general welfare for the people. Now, he's still at it. That is, favoring business over individuals in a way that Biden, who is a capitalist, has not and does not. In fact, his policy on this matter is different. What I'm talking about is the environment. Trump is alleged to have made a pay-for-play deal with big oil. And what's the price tag? To pay to Trump $1 billion for his campaign. And in response, drill, baby, drill. Now, this is not new, Trump saying that's his position. But this is pretty extraordinary, if true, that his quid pro quo to fuel his election, pardon the pun, is to allow big oil to pay him and take him to the finish line. Some of us who draw parallels with past unfortunate history think of a time in 1933 when the Nazi Party was bailed out because they were bankrupt, and they were bailed out by German businesses, IG Farben and Krupp. Is that what's going on here? We certainly know that Trump is prepared to be transactional in every situation, political, financial, familial. I don't think there's anything that Trump wouldn't do to satisfy an appetite he has for what he wants, no matter the cost to others or the nation. He does seem, however, to be loyal to foreign dictators. Putin comes to mind, of course. So what is the thought among us citizens who are observing this? Well, there were polls taken in the last couple of days, and again, these are snapshots and they're subject to error by how the question's asked and so forth. But it feels right, given how we've been watching the trial and how, from morning to night, except Wednesdays and weekends, we're getting more information about how Trump does his business, even though we knew the basic outline of his corruption before the trial ever began. So, for example, the poll says 52% believe that Trump falsified business records to conceal Stormy because of the campaign. Now, I don't know how far to go with the details, but that's about the question and that's about the reaction. Now, 52% is not 60 or 70%. But Trump's theory, and perhaps Bannon, his evil strategist, have decided that they could win by saying he's a victim of these prosecutions. Now, in the poll, there's a slight drop-off in that 47% believe he committed a crime. What will they believe if next week he's convicted? An interesting number, which is over the 50% mark, it's 51%, but it's 51% as compared to 34% who disagree. 54% say jail would be an apt and correct punishment for Trump. That's a strong statement. And we see that there are people prepared to humiliate themselves to be in Trump's good graces or in his transactional corridor where he gives something to you, provided you give something to him, but be wary, caveat emptor, there's no loyalty there. Now let's go to the Cult of Six, for example, the Supreme Court. Alito, in recent days, has said he's had nothing to do with the protest of the flag at his home and another one at a New Jersey beach, and that my wife did it. That's what he says. How can you respect these people when they don't stand up for their views because they want to express their view, but they want to corruptly, compromised by their partiality to Trump, be in a position to write opinions that will favor Trump and disfavor truth, the law, the facts, good and fair judgment, what you'd expect in a democracy. So, in recent days, par for the course, Alito upheld a electoral map that lower courts found to be crafted in such a way as to disfavor race and to make it a stronghold for white Republican partisans. And the Cult of Six, that is, the usual suspects, all agreed with him. Now, Kagan wrote the dissenting opinion for the three, and it's worth reading, although it's obvious. If you write and draw a map that is racist, that it cannot stand constitutional criticism, and so has to be thrown out, as did happen in the lower courts. But Kagan, who has not only a good legal mind, but a sense of humor that is cutting when it's so truthful to the problem. And she said, on at least a couple of occasions, I believe, that Alito had it upside down. And that's sweet. And that's the kind of dialogue we're having on our Supreme Court. But it's similar to the dystopic conduct of the judge in Florida, Judge Luce, my word, Cannon, who, no matter what's presented to her, she will delay, say it's too complicated, and dilly-dally with effect to try to prevent Trump from being exposed to a trial now, which might further strengthen those statistics I mentioned a moment ago. Pretty outrageous. It appears that there are citizens, the wealthiest of particularly, who are fine with Trump if they favor their bottom line. So it's not just oil and gas and $1 billion trade. And there are some people who've changed their stripes, and I'm not talking about Haley. I'm talking about contributors. Now, tech advisor Jacob Holberg gave the Dems contributions the last time. This time, he gave $1 million to Trump. Again, Trump, transactional. Also, the contributor, transactional. There was a time when there were known price tags to pay to members of Congress to get what you wanted. It appears that whatever you can get these days, even in the course of an election, is okay. As I've said before, though I'm supporting Biden, I think he failed us when he failed to fight from the moment of winning his election to January 6th, when we had the desperate attack on our government. And in the days afterwards, we should have showed more strength, more punch. We should have been all over it. Now, the good news is that this time, our vice president is not going to be cajoled and bothered into recognizing fraudulent electors to overthrow the election. And that if it is necessary to defend our government by force, the person in charge of the military until late in January of 2025 is Biden. And if reelected, as I expect and hope, he will be able to continue his process to bring us together, perhaps more moderate than some of us want, perhaps less dramatic than we care to do. But Biden believes sure and steady in the middle course, in media res, as Aristotle would put it, the middle way is the way to win. And he can't change his spots of character and political belief after all the years he's been in politics. And Trump, who's been corrupt for so many years, we can't expect him to become ethical, to become a benevolent dictator, to do anything different than he said in the worst of his moments. And we can't expect him to do anything good to the extent that he tries to cajole people at the fringes to help him carry one of the battleground states. So this is the problem we have. Private promises to wealthy people with new XYZ entities pledged secretly to support this criminal who, like in those old days, Nazi Germany, will be betrayed in the end should he prevail. Now, moving across the world to another monarchist, to King Charles. There's a very interesting painting, and I don't know that anybody has said it, and I have to believe they have because it's so obvious. It's a painting of Charles, and except for his face, which is, I don't know, strong, unpleasant, forceful. When the person is more complicated than that, I think. And there is red hemorrhaging across this oil painting. And what does that say? Blood red. Suppression, war. You know, some pain is worse than physical pain, which comes by the deprivation of rights and liberties, the ability to make a living, to have a home life, to have sufficient food, to be able to take care of your children, to have the medicine, all of these things. Trump has no interest in any of those things. Biden does. He's proven that. So for some people, if you really care to embrace freedom, however you define it for yourself, you may not have any chance to do so if Trump is elected. And Trump, if elected, may be our last elected president. So, the thing about Trump is, one of the questions in the poll was, do you believe that Trump is being persecuted? And the answer that people gave back is no. And there's a shift in favor of prosecution. So maybe the daylight into that courtroom has done what's necessary to save our republic. Heaven help us if he's acquitted. No joke. If by a corrupt juror or by two lawyers who try to dictate a different path, this case becomes a mistrial or an acquittal, which I think is highly unlikely, the case will end in a conviction. But the possibility of how a single case could affect our freedom tells us how important it is, win or lose, that we go forward in such a way as to fight for our freedom and for our republic. So that's what I got today. And so I say goodbye to you today until tomorrow from the Cathedral of Trees. All the best. Bye-bye.